Hi, my name is Katherine Hoffman. I'm a reporter with Flatland, and I'm here to bring you stories of Kansas City's Black history that you might not have heard before. I've spent the past few years in living rooms, museums, and historical societies digging up often untold stories about Black history in Kansas City. What I found was a rich history of traumas, triumphs, and a resilience like no other, and I want to share some of those stories with you. You'll hear about the racial history of midwives from a local expert, a lynching that happened in our own backyard, school integration, and a team of local historians working to recognize minority veterans from World War I. First up is a story about the place where I probably spent the most time growing up, the Black Church. Local leaders of some of Kansas City's oldest Black churches weigh in on the institution's history and how the church has spurred on the African American community from plantation to present day. One of my favorite moments from this story is when someone says that no matter what's happening outside, what trials you're facing, what people are telling you you don't matter, you can always be somebody in the church. And I think that's the perfect way to put it. Kansas City is no exception. So let's hear what some local leaders have to say about how the Black church has shaped people in our town.
I don't wanna be by myself. Don't wanna be by myself. Don't wanna be.
Can you guys talk to me about why the Black church has always been a staple in the Black community?
The collective identity of the Black church has a particular story that's told, and that story is perhaps of a liberating God. I'd like to just start with a little history of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is the oldest civil rights organization in the country. The same year that the framers of the Constitution met, 1787 in Philadelphia at St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, there was a young man named Richard Allen, freed slave, and Absalom Jones had gone down to pray at the altar, and he was escorted out to the balcony because that's where Black people were supposed to sit. And on that day when they walked out, they decided that, the God that they served did not discriminate, and that he was determined that we would worship under our own vine and fig tree. And so in Philadelphia at this blacksmith shop, the AME Church was born.
If you go back to this time of slavery, the church was the only place we could all come together and be able to talk to one another.
During the civil rights movement, and we was marching on Washington, and we was being put in jail and being treated in such an inhumane manner. It was the church where we went to come together and to strategize and organize and to be able to come up with different plans and processes in order for us to have the freedom that we have now. And even nowadays, we're still addressing issues that's going on, even in the 21st century, about racism and police brutality and unfairness and diversity. The church is still being the place where we're having those conversations.
This was the place where the rest of the world was treating us as second-class citizens, but we could be somebody in the church.
I don't think anything that we have done in the past and today could have been done without the church.
The Black church has always been that one place you can go to where it's almost like a safe haven over everything else that's going on in the world.
Take my hand, praise the Lord.
If you didn't already know, our country is facing a crisis. Mothers, particularly Black mothers, are dying at an increasing rate. Black mothers are facing racism in the healthcare system, which has been the inspiration for Black birthing centers popping up across the country, including Kansas City. In the past few years, there's been a noticeable increase in the number of people choosing to give birth with a midwife at a birthing center as opposed to a hospital. Keep watching to learn more about the racial history of midwifery, why it's coming back, and Kansas City's ties to the practice.
I want you to meet Mrs. Mary Cooley, a midwife who lives in Albany, Georgia. She and thousands of other midwives all over the South have dedicated their lives to the birthing of healthy babies.
I'm gonna hold you close to my heart now in that good mood.
My name is Ginger Breedlove. I'm a nurse midwife who's been in a variety of practices over 40 years that has included clinical practice for 25 years in a birthing center and hospital environment, about 10 years starting the University of Kansas midwifery education program and teaching, and then the last few years as a consultant for nurse midwives around the country. We are experts in normal, in particular helping care for women through pregnancy, during labor and birth and postpartum. Some midwives, based on their educational pathway, do family planning, gynecology, and primary care through the lifespan. So the definition can be variable based on somebody's pathway. The affinity for midwives and doulas is growing, and part of that is women and their families wanting to be better supported, to be more engaged in decision making, to understand what consent means and how to be able to use their voice in a way that makes this experience that you don't do very many times in your life one that is as best possible what you want it to be. Midwives have had a history in our country that is rooted in immigration to the country. So we could start with really the indigenous Native Americans who practice traditional midwifery and to this day have many customs that have carried over for decades. And then when enslaved women and women from Ireland came over as midwives and key community leaders that were looked up to preserve the community and make sure families had healthy births, were gradually sort of cast aside and demoralized, degraded, and removed from the practice of maternity care by the 20s and 30s.
2 days ago, a baby delivered by a midwife died when it ought to have lived. As your health officer, it was my duty to find out why that baby died.
It transitioned into birth in the hospital. And as that transition happened, there definitely was a shift in the belief of where it was safe to give birth and who attended you for the safest birth. The marginalized black and brown enslaved midwives and the Irish midwives gradually became illegal in most communities, and the event and growth of the public health system began to emerge. So the first advent of I would say the more modern midwife that evolved in the 40s and 50s were predominantly white nurses. When we look at midwifery and racial divide, I can speak to the profession of midwifery from the association lens that I am a part of and was actually a past president of the American College of Nurse Midwives. ACNM actually formed in Kansas City in 1955, which is an interesting part of history. Prior to that, midwives were in two different organizations. There were the granny midwives and grand midwives and traditional midwives and indigenous midwives still practicing around the country. Many underground, many illegal, some legal. It depended on the states. But if you look at nurse midwifery, there was a distinction made as the civil rights movement really emerged about the black nurse midwife. And the disenfranchisement of those black midwives, nurse midwives, in the National Organization of White Midwives was definitely contentious. We find that in our history. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that those racial divides were present in our profession, and a need to talk about that. America is facing a maternal health crisis that probably was not recognized or growing recognition until about 2017.
Doctors and nurses have worked hard and successfully to reduce the U.S. infant mortality rate in recent decades. What's less known and less understood is the rise in maternal mortality, mothers dying after pregnancy or from childbirth-related causes.
Finally, there's been a wake-up call where the public and the policymakers are openly talking about this maternal health crisis. And what is the crisis? It's a disparity and inequity in health care based on that Black and brown maternal mortality, dying mothers, has been rising dramatically for the last 20 years. Black and brown women are more likely to die in childbirth than their counterparts. I think there are systems that are taking a serious look at this, and I know there are others who are taking no responsibility at all. It has to come from the federal level with funding. States don't have a lot of money in their budgets, but part of that funding needs to go to communities of color, where programs can be funded adequately and designed and led by those Black female leaders.
Daddy Adam, come on over here and put your name on your baby's birth certificate. What you gonna call him, Adam Jr.? I reckon.
To say tensions were high in the summer of 2020 would be a gross understatement. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery were all unwilling martyrs in the Black Lives Matter movement. Just before that, Kansas City had its own police killing of Cameron Lamb to reckon with. During that summer, someone defaced a memorial dedicated to a lynching in Kansas City, and they didn't just vandalize it, they cut it off of its base and threw it over a cliff, trying to get rid of it altogether. This next story is about that lynching in Kansas City, the efforts to remember it, and the people that want to forget it ever happened. It's not easy to watch, and I want to give a warning about an image in the video that shows a white mob posing under the legs of their lynching victim. When making this video, I really debated including that image, and I fell back on my motto when I tell these types of stories. If it happened, we should know about it. But you should know that the focus of the video isn't just acts of violence. It's about how to tell the truth about history and how we can own up to our collective past in order to move forward as a city.
We're standing in the Community Remembrance Project exhibition. We have partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative, who opened the Lynching Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. We are the only site outside of Alabama. And what we're doing here is honoring those people who were victims of racial lynchings.
Not only do they memorialize and do truth-telling, is they make the connection between past racial terror and the modern-day mass incarceration system.
You know, lynching is an arbitrary act. People did it because they wanted to. No other reason. None of these people were guilty of any real crime. And when I look at Levi Harrington, who was also innocent of any crime, the idea that because somebody is Black and they're accessible, you can get to them and you can kill them, so you do, that's horrifying to me.
Just recently, we collected the second jar of soil for Levi Harrington. So that is what is at the Black Archives now. So a small group of us went to the actual coordinates where the lynching happened. I just think that the soil is such an important connector because it's where life comes from. So you have this tragedy, this tragic incident, and then you're preserving where life can grow from it.
These aren't the people's ashes. This is the dirt where underneath, as closely as we can tell, their bodies hung. So that would be where their blood, their sweat, their tears drained into that ground. And I think that makes it sacred to a certain extent because that's what they left us. That embodies the end of their lives. And most of them we know were innocent of the crimes. In fact, all of these people were innocent of the crimes. We know their biographies.
The memorial was cut down last June, directly at the time of the George Floyd protests. And so I definitely see that as a reaction to the empowerment of the voices of people gathering in Kansas City. This is not an isolated incident. They just collected the jar of soil for James Scott in Columbia, Missouri. Not even a week after that jar was collected, a marker commemorating James Scott was also cut down in Columbia, Missouri.
But we're not going to let that deter us. So EJI is making another one, and we're going to put it back in that spot, and we will protect it better because those kinds of people will not stop this road to justice.
I think that being proud of our heritage involves truth-telling and doing that in public spaces. In Missouri, there's like 30 Civil War markers. 27 of them are sympathetic to the Confederacy. In Kansas City alone, there's only 5 African American experience markers. And so we're trying to uplift the truth about our history because it is something that we need to confront in a way to integrate that into something that's healing for our nation to be fully what it can be and to move forward.
These are our stories, and we need to tell our stories.
Before there was Brown versus Board of Education, there was Corinthia Nutter and Esther Brown. Corinthia Nutter was a black teacher in a rundown 2-room school, and Esther Brown was a Jewish housewife. They were, by all accounts, ordinary women who decided enough was enough and did something extraordinary. They fought the state of Kansas to integrate South Park Elementary School in the 1940s. Despite threats, alienation, even a cross burning in Brown's front yard, they fought for equal education for black children. Something I love about this story is a quote from Corinthia Nutter at the time. She said, "Schools shouldn't be for color, they should be for the children." Nutter lived to be 97 years old and was recognized as a civil rights champion not just by Kansas City, but across the nation. Keep watching for more of her story. In the late 1940s, a cross burned in the front yard of Esther Brown, a Jewish housewife in Merriam, Kansas. Why? Because she dared to want equal education for black children. Merriam, Kansas was established as an integrated community with black and white children attending the same schools. Over time, the school segregated and the black children attended the Walker School.
That school had lots of issues. It was built as a one-room schoolhouse in the 1800s. The roof leaked there was no electricity, the plumbing was outside.
In the mid-1940s, the town held a bond election and raised $90,000 to build a new school, South Park Elementary School. It opened in 1947 and boasted a cafeteria, room for more than 200 students, a new playground, indoor plumbing, and higher paid staff. Everyone in the town paid for the construction of the school, but the white residents of Merriam decided it would only be for white children.
When they continued to refuse, the families banded together, and so did the teachers, and about 39 or 40 of the students walked out with the 2 teachers.
In 1948, all but 2 children from the Walker School boycotted the inadequate facility. Corinthia Nutter was a teacher at the Walker School and was instrumental in the year-long school walkout. Nutter and fellow teacher Hazel McCrae Weddington held classes in living rooms and church basements. During the boycott, the families decided to take their fight to court, and Brown was one of the driving forces behind filing the case as well as orchestrating the walkout. She worked tirelessly to organize the families, raise money for teacher salaries during the boycott, and start a local NAACP chapter. And that's the story of how two women fought to integrate South Park Elementary School. When my grandfather was a soldier in the Vietnam War, his job, like a lot of other black soldiers, was to walk first through the jungle in case there were any undetected landmines. His captain told him that he was going to be recognized publicly for his bravery, but he never was. His story is just one of countless stories of minority service members who went unrecognized because of discrimination against their race or religion. But a group of historians at Park University are trying to fix that. They're conducting the world's first systematic review of World War I to find minority service members who should have received a Medal of Honor but didn't because of discrimination against their race or religion. Keep watching for more.
Obviously, we knew that there was some kind of racism or anti-Semitism, but we really didn't know the scope.
These men, these heroes, have done actions that even today we see in combat that have been awarded the Medal of Honor, yet just because they were Black or Native American or Asian American or Jewish American, simply based on something so superficial, they didn't receive the honor that they deserve.
The Valor Medals Review Project deals with African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Jewish Americans, and Native Americans from World War I that may have been overlooked for the highest valor that this country can give, which is the Medal of Honor, due to race and/or religious discrimination.
Although there's been systematic reviews of every other war, World War I has been left untouched.
We ended up meeting with the World War I Centennial Commission and a number of other organizations in the country and decided we were going to perform one of the largest systematic reviews that the world has ever seen. Which is profound. It's never been done before. We have to meet modern day Medal of Honor standards, which is difficult for a war that happened 102 years ago. I had to find the longitude, the latitude, the weather, enemy provisions, various different things such as maps, geography, and individual movements, typically hour by hour if possible. And so in order to acquire that information, I had to dig through different documents, whether it's from the military itself or historical accounts, journals, letters, correspondence, military orders, so on and so forth. And I just kind of put together the story for each person. Were they crawling through the mud in the rain, through barbed wire while being shot at, and artillery blowing up around them, gas in the air? For each individual, so that they understand that it wasn't a small action, but it was significant, and that's why we're doing this. Most of my job is monitoring and finding individuals who qualify in the first place, tracking them down, getting a biographical sketch as to who they are so that we can get some information about unit and attachment info, and then tracking them through time. So the biggest part of my job is just finding people, where they went, where they ended up, and then seeing if there's anybody that's still alive that knew them. And if there is, we're lucky, and Dr. Westcott and I have the immense pleasure of speaking to them. What they recall about the individual, if they never knew them, what the family recalls about the individual. If they don't know anything at all, it's us informing them. Hey, here's who your great-grandfather or great-uncle was. We are so proud to be working with him in his service, and we want to tell you about him.
I remember the first one I did was to a young lady in Pennsylvania. So I called her and told her who we were, what we were doing, and then asked her if she was related to this particular person. There was dead silence. And pretty soon all I heard was weeping. And I said to her, I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she said, "We've waited 100 years for this phone call."
This is important because these are some individuals that are some of the most wonderful men we have ever read about and have ever done any work on, and yet their name does not remain in the history books along with other individuals. Nobody ever knew what they did and why they deserve more credit than they actually got.
Valor never expires, and our support for veterans should never expire.
For that last story, I had the privilege of talking to one of those soldiers' granddaughters. She told me about her grandfather, Captain Thomas Jones, and his actions on the night of September 27, 1918. That evening, heavy machine gun fire was shredding the Argonne Forest in the final weeks of World War I. Jones, who was a first lieutenant at the time, ran through flying bullets not once, but twice to render aid to fellow Allied soldiers. His story, and really all the stories today, was such an inspiration for me, and I hope it can be one for you too. I'm passionate about telling these kinds of stories because I think we need to know where we come from in order to move forward. These were just 5 of the countless stories from Kansas City of folks who have done and continue to do amazing things in our community. For more Black history stories like these ones, visit flatlandkc.org year-round.